Tales from the Darkside, Season 1, Episode 21, Bigelow's Last Smoke. An episode where a chain smoker named Frank Bigelow is trapped in his own apartment, and all he has to do to get out is not smoke. But he's a little addicted to smoking. This has a lot in common with the Stephen King short story, Quitters Incorporated, though it doesn't go quite as far as that one does. And I think a really good episode. It's two characters, it's a one-room location, but here it actually kind of makes sense. The kind of cheap-looking set actually adds to the story, since really what happened is this man, who's taunting him from this TV and played perfectly by Sam Anderson, keeps telling Frank Bigelow to stop smoking, and every time he does, well, some bad things happen to him.
Yes. Once you've given up tobacco, you'll find your mind works much more clearly in the morning.
And they've actually done a recreation of his apartment. So this is a set location, but it's kind of also supposed to be a set. This is a recreation of his apartment that this nice company built for Mr. Bigelow to get him to stop smoking.
You contacted our clinic and signed up for our program?
I did not!
They're not making it easy for Mr. Frank Bigelow, since the point is to get him to stop smoking, but they still will tempt him with cigarettes. If he wants to smoke, he can do it. They lay cigarettes out on his nightstand, out on his kitchen table, tempting him that if he wants to smoke, he can. However, every time he does light a cigarette, the room starts going crazy, and they have this strobe light and beeping sound that lights up the entire room, and a robotic voice tells him, "Please put out the cigarette, please put out the cigarette," and he gets a demeritus. Don't want to get too many of those. So they will allow him to smoke, but there will be consequences. See, he has to quit on his own. This has to be a voluntary thing. I mean, they do have him trapped in a cage right now, but he still has to kind of want to quit himself. In the short story Quitters, Inc., Stephen King went a little farther, where every time the guy smoked, there were people that would stalk his house and keep track of him, and if they caught him smoking, they would actually electrocute his wife and his kids, and keep torturing them until eventually, if he smokes too many times, they will shoot him and kill him. Mr. Frank Bigelow just has to deal with some annoying strobe lights and a siren for right now.
You can't do this. It's totally against the law.
No, it's not.
The character of Bigelow is pretty good, not because he's necessarily likable, but because he is kind of an ass. So you don't feel that bad for him. He yells at the TV of Dr. Synapsis, who keeps telling him to give up the cigarettes, and just seems a little angry and doesn't really catch on to the fact that he needs to stop smoking to get out of this room. He's under the impression that the smoke alarm above him is really what's indicating to Dr. Synapsis and the crew that he's smoking, so he tries to, be sneaky about it and only smoke a little bit and then blow it into a water cooler so that it doesn't pick up on the smoke. Of course, this doesn't work because they have the entire room surrounded with cameras everywhere, and Dr. Synapsis is watching him the entire time. He'll come on the television, and then he'll kind of go away for a second, and then when Mr. Bigelow turns around, he'll come back on the television and follow him again. So obviously, he's not getting away with anything. They have this fake room that's a recreation of his apartment, and they have the entire thing surveilled. So Mr. Bigelow is not exactly the smartest person in the world, but he keeps on smoking and keeps on smoking. He keeps getting these demerits, and they just start taking away everything from him. So they take away his bed, they take away his computer. His apartment looked pretty nice at the time, seems like he had some money, to the point where he's basically sitting on the floor with one cigarette left. He's really not getting this. If this actually was the short story Quitters, Inc., he would have been dead by this point. The corporation would have killed him and his entire family. But luckily, this is Bigelow's last smoke, so he's just getting privileges taken away and all the furniture and bedding taken from this apartment. This is another episode that has the imprint of the person I mentioned before, my favorite guy, Michael McDowell. But here he just did the teleplay, and Craig Mitchell and Kenneth Hannis did the actual story. So it is really well paced, and it is a good story, but it definitely doesn't feel like a Michael McDowell episode. Michael McDowell almost always puts in some type of monster, and this is more psychological horror if anything else. I think if you're a smoker, this would probably mess with you a little more, but I never got into that. I might try vaping though. Should I do it? Frank Bigelow also mentions that he smokes 3 packs a day. I've always heard 2 is like the maximum. I've never heard anyone that's done 3. And there's 20 cigarettes in a pack, so that would be 60 cigarettes in a 24-hour period. That is impressive. Maybe this is for Mr. Bigelow's own good. And they mentioned that he inadvertently signed up for this by watching a TV commercial and sending something in the mail. You always got to read the fine print in those contracts. Of course, this wouldn't stand up in a court of law because you actually can't just put anything you want in a contract, but whatever. I think this episode would have been more enjoyable if Mr. Frank Bigelow was a little smarter. See, he doesn't ever really try to stop smoking. It just keeps getting things taken away from him. There's a disembodied voice that's supposedly in a room next to him that convinces him to give up the rest of his cigarettes. He'll tell him how to get out of the room. This never happens. Like, he's just really, really dumb. I mean, he doesn't even try. And the ending doesn't exactly make a whole lot of sense either. So somehow he ends up getting out of this room. We don't exactly know how, because he smashes the smoke alarm and goes crazy. And then he wakes up and it's a Groundhog Day situation. Except for this time, the only other character is on the TV and talking about how they're going to get rid of his addiction to caffeine. Except we never really saw him get rid of his addiction to cigarettes. So I'm not sure what happened to that, but I guess they're going to keep doing this, maybe? It would have been better if they just did a Groundhog Day situation with his cigarettes, since we never actually see him quit. We're just supposed to assume that he did quit, I guess.
Today, we're going to do a little work on your addiction to caffeine.
Also, he keeps getting these demeritus every time he smokes, but they never really explain what the punishment is. It seems like they just take all the stuff out of the room, but they probably could have explained this a little better. But overall, I still think this is a solid episode. I like the idea, the execution's good, both the actors do a really good job. Frank being kind of a narcissistic, wannabe tough guy, thinking he can just bully his way out of the situation. And Dr. Synapsis being cool and calm and letting you know, Mr. Bigelow, all you gotta give up is smoking. So I think I'm feeling a very high, 7 out of 10 for Bigelow's Last Smoke. Almost an 8, but if they fixed a few of the issues I mentioned, I would give it an 8, but I think I'm going to get a 7. But this is definitely towards the higher end of the first season, especially with the episodes that are about to follow. Richard Romanos played the character Frank Bigelow. He got his start in the Mission Impossible TV series in the 1960s, and interestingly enough, he was considered for the role of Michael Corleone in 1972's The Godfather. Wow, that would have been great if he got that role. He did not though, but Martin Scorsese did put him in Mean Streets in 73. I mean, wouldn't you prefer to be in Mean Streets instead of The Godfather? Oh man, was that a missed opportunity? Of course, Michael Corleone was played by Al Pacino. Weird how things happen. Imagine if he got that one role. And he would have done a good job too. He definitely plays the kind of the tough guy pretty well. He was later in the TV show The Sopranos, and a ton of TV shows in the 60s and 70s like Kojak and 5-0. Next up in our journey to review every single Tales from the Darkside, we are going to suffer through episode 22, Grandma's Last Wish, which is the first episode of Tales from the Darkside written by Jules Selbo. We'll be seeing her a lot in the subsequent seasons, and if Michael McDowell is my favorite writer, Jules Selbo is my least favorite writer. Strap yourselves in for this one and get ready to laugh or pull your hair out. If you don't have any hair, bang your head against the wall. Check out our playlist where we have all the episodes in order. We already covered the entire series of monsters, and we're almost done with Fear itself.